You're listening to Cowboy Dusk channel, where the last light of day meets the stories that matter most. This is where we tell tales of the Old West, of gunfighters who learned that mercy takes more courage than a bullet, of love that begins in dust and desperation, of strangers who become family, and of the quiet compassion that redeems even the most broken among us. If stories like these feel like home to you, then pull up a chair. You belong here. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. He killed 5 men and swore he'd never draw again. For 3 years, he lived alone on a ranch at the edge of nowhere, sleeping on his own floor because he didn't believe he deserved a bed. He carved tally marks into the rafter above his fireplace, one for each life he'd taken, and every morning he woke up and looked at them. Then one afternoon, he watched a man kick a woman's carpet bag into the dust at the train depot, her belongings scattered, a cracked tintype, a worn Bible, spools of thread rolling through the dirt like little wheels of shame. The crowd laughed, and something inside him broke. He picked up her things one by one and said 5 words that changed everything. "I will take her, if she will come." But she had a secret hidden in the spine of that Bible, a secret worth killing for. And the most dangerous man in town already knew about it. What happened on the night they burned his barn, and what a 17-year-old girl did that no one saw coming. We'll stay with you long after this story ends. This story reminds us that the strongest thing a man can do isn't pull a trigger. It's open his hand. And sometimes the person the whole world says is worth nothing turns out to be worth everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, what moment gave you chills?
Wyatt Sands killed his last man on a Friday in spring, and he swore he would never draw again. But standing on the Millerton Depot platform, watching a man kick a woman's carpetbag into the dust, he understood that some oaths are born just to be broken. The 2:15 from Cheyenne was late. It was always late. Wyatt stood in the shade of the depot overhang with a barbed wire crate at his feet and watched the heat shimmer off the rails like water that was not there. The cicadas were screaming in the cottonwoods. His shirt stuck to his back. He had been in Millerton 2 hours, which was 2 hours too long. Town made his skin crawl these days. All those eyes that would not quite meet his but watched just the same. They did not avoid him because they knew what he had done in Abilene. They avoided him because he was the strange one, the hermit rancher who lived alone and talked to his cattle and came to town only when he had no other choice. 3 years of silence will do that to a man's reputation. Folks start filling that silence with their own stories, and none of them are kind. He shifted his weight against the post and let his eyes move across the platform. Mrs. Pettigrew stood near the ticket window with her parasol up against the sun like it was a weapon. The station master came out squinting at his pocket watch like the thing had personally wronged him. 2 cowboys from the ranches west of town leaned against the rail, spitting tobacco and talking about nothing. And there was Virgil Kane. Virgil sat outside the saloon across the street in a cane back chair tilted against the wall. He had his hat pulled low, but his eyes were open. They were watching Wyatt with the lazy interest of a cat studying a mouse hole. Virgil was new to Millerton, maybe 6 months. He worked for Hiram Cadell, which meant he did whatever Cadell needed doing, and none of it was honest. He wore his pistol low on his hip, tied down with a leather thong the way men do when they expect to use it. Wyatt had seen plenty of men wear their guns that way. Most of them were dead now. He filed Virgil's gaze away, did not react, did not look twice. The whistle cut through the afternoon, distant and lonesome. The black smoke rolled up against the hard blue sky, and the Union Pacific chugged in with a screech of brakes and a blast of steam that sent the depot dogs scattering. Coal smoke drifted across the platform, bitter and thick. 5 passengers stepped down. A drummer with his sample case came first, already sweating through his collar. Then an old woman in black who moved like her bones hurt. 2 cowboys heading for the ranches. And her. She came last, one hand gripping the rail, the other clutching a carpet bag that had seen better days. Her dress was calico, blue flowers faded to the color of old bruises. The straw bonnet on her head had a broken ribbon that hung down like something defeated. But her chin was up. That was what Wyatt noticed first. Not the worn dress or the patched boots or the way her knuckles were white on the bag handle. Her chin. It was up, and her eyes were moving across the platform with the careful, measuring look of a cornered animal that still had teeth. She stepped onto the platform and stopped, looking around with the kind of careful hope that hurt to watch. A man pushed through the small crowd. Hiram Cadell, who owned the feed store, and thought that made him king. He was thick through the middle, wore a vest that strained at the buttons, and had the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled without wanting something in return. He stopped 3 feet from her, thumbs hooked in his vest, and looked her up and down like she was a horse he was thinking of buying. "You, Clara Brennan," he said. Her chin came up another notch. "I am. Turn around." The platform went quiet. Even the cowboys stopped their spitting to watch. Clara looked at Cadell for a long moment. Then she turned. But she did it slow, deliberate. And she held his eyes the entire rotation, her gaze never dropping, never wavering, until she had come full circle and was facing him again. It was not submission. It was a woman measuring the man who thought he owned her and finding him short. "You bring the dowry," Cadell said. $500 and a Singer sewing machine. "My father passed," Clara said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "There is nothing." "Then you ain't worth the price of your ticket." The crowd made that sound, that ugly little hum of satisfaction people make when they are watching someone else's misery and feeling grateful it is not theirs. Clara's chin trembled just once. Then she bent and reached for her carpet bag. Cadell kicked it. The bag tumbled off the platform into the dust below, contents spilling, a threadbare chemise, a tintype in a cracked frame, a Bible with a worn leather cover, a wooden sewing box that broke open and scattered spools of thread across the dirt like little wheels of shame. The crowd laughed. Mrs. Pettigrew announced loud enough for the whole territory to hear, "Shameful," leading a man on like that. Clara knelt in the dust and gathered her things with shaking hands. She tried to fold the chemise, but her fingers would not work right. A spool of thread rolled past her, and she lunged for it. And that was when one of the men called out, "She is pretty enough for other work. Silver Dollar is always hiring." More laughter. Clara's face went white. Everyone knew what the Silver Dollar meant. Cadell straightened his vest. "I ordered goods," he said, his voice carrying across the platform like a verdict. "Got damaged freight." That was when Wyatt saw Virgil Kane stand up. Virgil uncrossed his legs and pushed off the wall with the slow ease of a man who had all the time in the world. He walked across the street toward the platform, and he was smiling. Wyatt recognized that smile the way a man recognizes a rattlesnake's buzz. He had seen it on faces in Abilene saloons right before things went bad. The smile of a predator who has spotted something unattended. Virgil stopped at the edge of the platform, reached out a hand toward Clara, who was still kneeling in the dust. "Need a place to stay, miss," Virgil said. His voice was smooth as oiled leather. "I know somewhere warm." Clara looked up at the extended hand. She did not take it. But she did not have anywhere else to look. Wyatt set down his barbed wire crate. He did not think about it, did not weigh the costs, did not consider what it would mean to his quiet life, or his hidden name, or the 3 years of careful invisibility he had built like a wall between himself and the world. He just moved. The same way a man moves when he sees a wolf closing on a calf. Not pity, not chivalry, something deeper and older than both. He stepped forward, removed his hat, and said 5 words. "I will take her, if she will come." The silence was so complete you could hear the telegraph key clicking inside the station office, could hear the train hissing, could hear Clara's sharp intake of breath. Sheriff Burrell took a step forward. He was a tired-looking man with a star on his chest that did not quite sit straight. "Wyatt, you ain't exactly in a position to be taking on responsibilities." "Did not say marry," Wyatt answered. "Said I would take her if she will come." He looked at Clara for the first time. Her face was streaked with dust and tear tracks. Her eyes were the color of creek water, and they were staring at him like he had just stepped out of a burning building carrying something she thought was lost. "You need a place," he said. "I got one. I cannot pay you. Did not ask you to. Why would you? You need help or not." She looked at him, looked at the crowd, looked at the train that would carry her back to nothing, looked at Cadell's face, which had gone tight with something that was not disappointment. It was closer to panic. The panic of a man watching something valuable slip through his fingers, though nobody else on that platform would have known it. "Yes," Clara whispered. Wyatt bent and started gathering her scattered belongings. The broken sewing box, the spools of thread, the tintype of two stern-faced people who must have been her parents. He handed them to her one by one, not looking at the crowd, not looking at anything but the work his hands were doing. Behind him, Virgil Kane stepped back. His smile did not fade, but it changed, became something colder. He glanced at Cadell. "You did not lose a bride, did you?" Virgil said quietly. "You lost something else." Cadell's jaw went tight as a trap spring. "Shut your mouth." Wyatt helped Clara to her feet. She took his hand. Her fingers were small and shaking, but her grip was strong. They walked through the crowd. People stepped back like they were contagious. Wyatt did not look at any of them, kept his eyes forward, kept walking. His buckboard was hitched at the rail. Buck, his dun gelding, flicked an ear at them. Wyatt helped Clara up onto the seat, then lifted her bag into the back. The barbed wire crate could wait. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. Mrs. Pettigrew said something sharp about sin, but Wyatt did not hear the words. He clicked his tongue and Buck moved forward. The wagon wheels creaked, the crowd parted. They rolled out of Millerton. Behind them, Virgil Kane stood at the edge of the platform. He took a few steps in their direction, cupped his hands around his mouth and called out after them, "Sands, is it? Or is it something else?" Wyatt did not turn around, but his back went rigid as iron, and he did not breathe easy again until the town was a mile behind them and the prairie had swallowed the sound of Virgil's voice. The mail-order bride sat beside him with her broken sewing box on her lap and her Bible clutched against her chest, and neither of them spoke as the wheels turned and the dust rose, and the afternoon sun pressed down on them like the weight of every choice they had just made. Clara had learned young that when a man is kind to you for no reason, there is always a reason. You just have not found it yet. She sat on the buckboard beside the stranger who had claimed her at the depot and studied him the way she studied everything, quietly and from the corner of her eye, cataloging details the way her father had taught her to catalog seed stock. "Hands first. Always look at a man's hands," her father used to say. "They tell you what he does when no one is watching." Wyatt's hands were large and rough, rope calluses across both palms, the kind that came from working cattle in all weather. Scarred knuckles on the left hand, maybe from catching them on barbed wire, maybe from something else. And on his right index finger, another callus, a different kind, smaller, harder, worn smooth from years of pressure in one specific spot. Clara knew what made that mark. She had seen it on her Uncle Silas's hand, and on the hands of the men who came to the farm to collect debts. It was the kind of callus that only forms from a trigger guard. This man who had rescued her from the depot was not just a rancher. He was something else too, or he had been, and the fact that he was hiding it was a piece of information Clara tucked away carefully, the way she tucked everything away. Information was the only currency she had ever been able to keep. The prairie stretched out around them. Endless grass the color of old gold rolling in waves under a wind that smelled like dust and sage. The sky was enormous. Back in Missouri, the trees and hills hemmed in the world made it manageable. Out here, the world went on forever, and Clara felt small inside it. She clutched her mother's Bible against her chest and felt the slight ridge along the spine where the map was hidden. Still there, still safe. The only valuable thing her father had left her, and she would die before she let anyone take it. 3 miles passed without a word. The silence between them was not uncomfortable exactly, but it was full, like a room with too much furniture. "You lived alone 3 years," Clara said. "Why?" Wyatt kept his eyes on the road. "Because I did not want anyone living with the kind of man I am." She filed that away too. The road narrowed at a creek crossing where cottonwoods grew thick and the water ran shallow over brown stones. Wyatt pulled Buck to a stop. The gelding dipped his head to drink, and the buckboard creaked as it settled. There was a man on horseback in the middle of the crossing. Virgil Kane sat his horse like he had been there for hours. His hat was pushed back, and that same smooth smile was on his face. He did not move to let them pass. Just sat there with one hand on his saddle horn and the other resting easy on his thigh, close to the pistol that hung low on his hip. "Narrow road, Sands," Virgil said. Wyatt's hands tightened on the reins. His voice came out flat. "Wide enough for 2, not 3. Virgil's eyes slid to Clara. She felt the weight of his gaze like a hand on her skin. Everything in her wanted to look away, to drop her eyes the way she had learned to do around dangerous men. Instead, she looked straight back at him, held his stare, let him see that she was afraid, yes, but she was not going to show it. Virgil's eyebrow rose. Just slightly. Surprised, maybe. Or impressed. The smile changed, became something almost respectful, though respect from a man like that was a coin with a sharp edge. "Pretty girl," Virgil said. He pulled his horse to the side and let them pass. As the buckboard splashed through the shallow water, he called after them, "Careful you do not lose her. Careful you—" Wyatt did not answer. His jaw was tight as braided wire. Clara sat still and kept her face composed, and told her heart to stop hammering because she did not have the luxury of being afraid right now. They drove another 2 miles. The road climbed a low rise, and when they crested it, Clara saw the cabin. Small, weathered gray, smoke rising from the chimney. A fence line stretched away from it into the grass, and 6 white-faced Hereford cattle grazed nearby. A lean-to against the cabin's west side served as a barn. A garden patch showed green against the brown prairie. It was not much, but it was real. Clara looked at it the way she looked at everything, not with romance, but with calculation. She was already seeing what it could become. The door needed rehinging. The garden could be twice that size with proper tending. The fence rail on the porch was cracked but still standing. They pulled up to the rail. Wyatt climbed down and helped Clara off the seat. He carried her carpet bag inside and set it on the floor. The cabin was 1 room, maybe 14 feet by 16. Stone fireplace on the far wall with embers glowing orange. Rope bed in the corner with a corn husk mattress and a gray wool blanket. Pine table with 2 chairs, wash tub on a nail. Shelves holding tins without labels. A Winchester rifle over the mantel, dust filming the barrel like it had not been touched in years. Above the fireplace, in the shadow of the rafter beam, Clara saw marks carved into the wood. She could not count them in the dim light. Something about them nagged at her, but she let it go. The air smelled like wood smoke and coffee grounds, and the particular loneliness of a man who had stopped caring whether his house smelled good or not. "Ain't much," Wyatt said behind her. Clara set her carpet bag down. "You take the bed," she said. Wyatt moved past her to the fireplace. "I will sleep here." He pointed to the floor. He dragged a bedroll from under the bed. Wool blanket saddled for a pillow, dropped it by the fire, already decided. Clara's throat worked. She looked at the bed, at the floor, at Wyatt's back as he bent to add wood to the coals. She wanted to argue but did not have the standing for it. She was a stranger in a stranger's house, alive because of his kindness, and the smartest thing she could do right now was accept grace and try to understand why it had been given. She sat on the edge of the bed. The ropes creaked under her weight. She still wore her traveling dress, wrinkled and stained from kneeling in the depot dust. She pulled off her bonnet. Her hair was stuck to her scalp with sweat. "There is a pump out back," Wyatt said without turning around. "Water is clean, cold. Thank you." He did not answer. Clara lay down without undressing and stared at the ceiling where smoke stains made patterns like dark continents on a map. Outside, the sun set, and the cabin filled with orange light that faded to gray and then to black. The fire crackled. A coyote yipped somewhere distant, and another answered. She listened to Wyatt settle onto his bedroll, listened to his breathing. It was slow and steady, the rhythm of a man used to sleeping alone. But it was not quite even, not quite right. He was awake too. In the deep of the night she heard something else, the soft sound of wood on wood, a floorboard being lifted and set aside, a rustle of cloth. Then the board settled back into place, and Wyatt's breathing resumed its slow cadence. He had opened something under the floor, checked it, put it back. Clara stared at the darkness above her, and added this to her catalog of things she knew about the man who had saved her. She slept badly and woke to gray light and the sound of hoofbeats. Not close, not the sound of arrival, the sound of someone circling, watching. She went to the window and looked out through the gap in the shutters. The morning was cool and dew silvered the grass. She could not see the rider, but she could see the evidence. Fresh hoofprints in the damp earth, maybe 50 yards from the cabin. And beside them, a splash of tobacco spit still wet and dark against the ground. Someone had been watching them all night. Clara's hand went to the Bible in her carpet bag. The map was still there, hidden in the spine. She pressed it flat, tucked it back, and said nothing. Coffee spilled across Clara's hand when the gunshot cracked from the north. One shot, then silence. She was at the table, pouring from the pot she had set to boil, and the sound made her hand jerk and the dark liquid splash across her fingers, scalding hot. She set the pot down hard and went to the window. Wyatt was walking back from the fence line with the Winchester in his hand. Behind him, he dragged a dead coyote by the hind legs, leaving a dark track through the grass. He moved with the efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times. No wasted motion, no hesitation. No. But his face as he came closer was the face of a man remembering something he would rather forget. The shot had been clean. The coyote was dead. And something in Wyatt's expression said that killing, even killing a predator testing his fence, had opened a door he kept nailed shut. He leaned the Winchester against the porch rail and dragged the coyote to the far edge of the property without looking at Clara. She watched him through the window, watched him stand over the dead animal for a moment, his shoulders tight, his head down. Then he turned and walked toward the cabin. Clara was already back at the stove by the time he came in. She had wiped the spilled coffee and poured 2 cups. She handed him one without a word. He took it, wrapped both hands around the tin, and drank. His eyes closed. 3 years since I had real coffee, he said. Why? Grinding beans for one person sounds too lonely to bear. It was the first crack in his wall. Clara heard it and knew enough not to push. She had been up since before dawn. The cabin had needed work, and work was the only language she trusted, the only thing that had never betrayed her. She had started with the shelves. The tins were jumbled together, no labels, no order. She found an old newspaper and ink that had gone to sludge, mixed it with soot from the fireplace, used a stick for a pen, and wrote labels: coffee, beans, sugar, salt. The handwriting was rough, but the words were clear, and when she stepped back, the shelf looked like it belonged to someone who planned to stay. While organizing, she found it, a loose board under the shelf edge. She pressed it. It shifted. She glanced back. Wyatt was outside with the cattle. She lifted the board. Oilcloth wrapped around something heavy. The shape was unmistakable. She reached down and touched the cloth. It was soft with oil, well maintained. Beneath it, cold even through the fabric, was a Colt .45 revolver. Not dusty like the Winchester, not forgotten. Someone had been caring for this gun, oiling it, keeping it ready. The same man who kept a dusty rifle over the mantel as decoration kept a loaded pistol hidden under his floorboards like a secret he could not let go of. Clara put the board back exactly as it had been. She memorized the location and moved on. Her next task was the map. She could not leave it in the Bible. If someone searched her things, the Bible would be the first place they looked. She opened her sewing box, the one that had broken at the depot, but she had pieced back together with thread and determination. She lifted the fabric lining at the bottom, slid the folded map beneath it, smoothed the lining back into place. The map was invisible now, hidden under thread spools and needles and a thimble with a dent in it. She made biscuits, her mother's recipe. Flour, yeast dissolved in warm water. A pinch of salt, lard worked in with her fingers. At the bottom of the paper, in different ink, her mother had written, "Add love. It makes them rise better." Clara's eyes burned, but she blinked hard and kept working. She kneaded the dough on the table, formed it into rounds, placed them in the skillet she had scrubbed clean with sand and hot water, and set it on the fire. The smell of baking bread filled the cabin. It smelled like home, like something that mattered. Wyatt came in from the stock and stopped in the doorway. He looked at the clean floor, the labeled shelves, the biscuits steaming on the table. He looked at Clara standing by the fire with flour on her hands, and her dress dark with scrub water. He did not say anything for a long time. You did not have to do all this, had to do something. He sat down at the table. Clara put 3 biscuits on his plate and took one for herself. He picked up a biscuit and tore it open. Steam rose from the white inside. He ate slowly, carefully, like he was afraid it might disappear. "My mom made these," he said, "every Sunday after church." 10-year-old memories, she could tell, still raw, still close. He finished the second biscuit and she pushed the plate toward him. He took the last one but did not eat it right away, just held it. "Been 10 years, he said. "Still remember the smell?" Clara waited. He ate the third biscuit and sat back and looked at her across the table. "Thank you." 2 words. But the way he said them carried the weight of 3 years of loneliness. After breakfast, Wyatt saddled Buck and rode out to check the north fence. He said it was about coyotes. Clara watched him go from the porch and knew it was about something else. He was gone 2 hours. When he came back, his face was set and his jaw was tight, and he did not tell her what he had found. She did not ask. But she noticed the way his eyes moved to the road when he thought she was not looking, and the way his hand went to his hip where a gun would hang if he wore one, touching nothing but the memory of it. What he had found out there, though Clara did not know it, was hoofprints. The same ones she had seen outside the cabin. They led from the property toward town in a straight line, and beside them, in the dirt near the gatepost, was a hand-rolled cigarette butt, the kind Virgil Caine smoked. Wyatt picked it up, smelled it, dropped it in the dirt, and ground it under his boot. He did not tell Clara. She did not tell him about the Colt under the floorboards. They were both hiding things for the same reason, because trust was a bridge neither of them knew how to build, and the only materials they had were silence and hope. The afternoon brought a visitor. A boy came up the road on a mule, maybe 13, gangly and sunburnt. He had a burlap sack tied to the saddle. Clara stepped onto the porch. The boy pulled up and looked at her and looked away quick, his face going red. "Delivery from Hulcom's," he said to the mule's ears. "Mr. Sands is out checking fence. I can take it." The boy swung down and untied the sack. 50 pounds of flour. Set it on the porch, kept his eyes on the ground. "Thank you," Clara said. The boy nodded, started to climb back on the mule, stopped. His mouth opened and closed and opened again. "Folks in town," he said. His voice dropped. "They are saying things." Clara's hands tightened on the porch rail. "What things?" The boy's face got redder. "I ain't supposed to say. Mama told me not to." But he looked up at her finally. "They are saying you and Mr. Sands are living in sin, that it ain't proper, you being here without being married." Clara kept her face still. "And there is something else," the boy said. He was talking fast now, words tumbling. "Mr. Cadell, has been buying up debt paper on the ranches around here. All of them, even Mr. Sands's land. I heard my pa talking about it. The boy kicked the mule and rode off fast. Clara stood on the porch with the flour sack at her feet and her hands shaking. She went inside and sat at the table, picked up her sewing and tried to work, but the needle kept slipping. Her mind would not settle. Cadell buying land debt, the map being hidden, the colt under the floorboards, Virgil Kane's smile, the hoofprints in the damp earth. All of it swirled together like storm clouds building on the horizon. When Wyatt came back near sunset, Clara was stirring beans on the fire and had herself under control. She told him about the delivery and the gossip. She did not tell him about Cadell buying the land debts. Another piece of information hoarded. Another brick in the wall she built around herself because every time she had trusted someone in her life, they had broken that trust and used the pieces to hurt her. Wyatt listened to the gossip about living in sin, and his face went hard, but he said nothing. He stepped onto the porch and gripped the rail. Clara watched through the window. What happened next was quiet and terrifying. Wyatt's hands tightened on the porch rail until the wood groaned. Then, without a word, without any expression on his face at all, he snapped a section of the rail clean off, just broke it, like snapping a stick, held the broken piece in his hands, and stood there breathing hard, staring at it. And Clara could see that what was in his face was not anger. It was fear. The kind of fear a man feels when he looks at his own hands and remembers what they are capable of and does not trust them. He set the broken wood down carefully, walked to the barn, did not come back for an hour. That night, Clara lay awake. The fire had burned to embers. Wyatt was on his bedroll by the hearth. She turned her head on the pillow and looked at the doorway. Moonlight came through the cracks in the shutters, pale and silver. She saw Wyatt get up, saw him move to the door, saw him step onto the porch with the Winchester in his hands. He sat there for a long time, the gun across his knees, not watching the stars, not watching the prairie, watching the road to town. Clara closed her eyes and added this to everything else she knew. The trigger callus, the hidden colt, the broken porch rail, the way he had looked at the dead coyote, the way he sat in the moonlight with a rifle on his lap and eyes like a man waiting for something he hoped would never come. She did not sleep again that night. Clara had been to many churches in her life, but she had never walked into one knowing she would leave with less dignity than she carried in. The night before, she had read to Wyatt from the book she found on his shelf, Little Women. The cover was worn soft and the spine cracked, and on the inside cover in careful script it said, "Property of Sarah Sands," his mother's name. Clara read about the March sisters and their Christmas without presents. Her voice filled the cabin while the fire crackled and Wyatt sat on the floor with a piece of willow and his pocket knife, carving something she could not quite see. She glanced up. His knife had stopped moving. He was looking at the wood in his hands with an expression she had not seen before. Something soft, something unguarded. He set the finished piece on the table without a word. A spoon. Smooth handle, deep bowl, every curve deliberate. Clara picked it up and ran her thumb along the wood. It was smooth as water. She set it with her things on the shelf and did not say anything because some gifts are too big for thank you. Now it was Sunday morning. They walked the 7 miles to Millerton because the buckboard had thrown a wheel spoke, and Wyatt had not had time to fix it. The sun climbed as they walked. The prairie stretched golden on every side, and the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. On the road, Wyatt talked more than he had since she arrived. He told her about his mother, how she sang hymns every morning while she worked. How she was the reason he still owned a Bible even though he had not opened it in 3 years. How she died of fever when he was 22. And he had been trying to live up to the kind of person she believed he was ever since, and failing at it most days. Clara hummed. She did not plan to do it. The melody just came, the way melodies do when you are walking in warm air and the world feels almost safe. Come, thou fount of every blessing, the tune her own mother had sung while kneading bread. Wyatt stopped walking. My mother sang that, he said. Silence. The grass rustled. A meadowlark sang from a fence post. They started walking again, and after a few yards, his hand brushed hers. Neither of them pulled away. The church was white-clappered with a cracked bell tower. The bell was ringing when they arrived, and people streamed toward the doors in their Sunday best. Women with parasols and bustles. Men in clean shirts with watch chains glinting. Children scrubbed and combed and already getting dirty again. The crowd saw them coming. The stream of people slowed and stopped. Every head turned. Clara's steps faltered. Wyatt's hand touched the small of her back, brief and steadying. They walked up the steps. The crowd parted, bodies moving aside to let them through, but not too close. Inside, the pews filled up with suspicious speed. People who had been leaving gaps suddenly moved together, packed in tight. Every row full by the time Clara and Wyatt reached the aisle. Except the last pew. It was empty. They sat. The wood was hard. Behind them, people kept coming in, but nobody sat in their row. The space around them stayed vacant, as if loneliness was catching. Reverend Michaels came out from the back. He was old and white-haired and bent in the shoulders, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass. He looked at the congregation, looked at Clara and Wyatt alone in the back. His mouth tightened. He opened his Bible, from the Gospel of Matthew. "Judge not, that ye be not judged." His voice carried strong despite his age. He read the whole passage and then closed the book and looked out at the pews. "I have been pastor of this church for 32 years, he said, and I have seen a lot of judging in that time. Most of it wrong." Mrs. Pettigrew shifted in her seat. Third row, right side. Her daughter Sarah sat next to her, 17 and quiet, eyes wide. "The Lord tells us to help the stranger," Reverend Michaels said, "to feed the hungry, to shelter those who have no home. Some of you have forgotten that." He looked directly at Clara and Wyatt. "I have visited the Sands place twice now. I saw two people living decent, treating each other with respect, working hard. That is what I saw." Clara felt something crack inside her chest. This old man with his sharp eyes and his cracked bell tower was the first person in Millerton besides Wyatt who had treated her like a human being. She noticed something as the Reverend spoke. He looked at her with recognition. Not the way people recognize a face, but the way they recognize a name. When his eyes met hers, they held a question he did not ask out loud. After the service, Clara and Wyatt walked to Holtcombe's Mercantile for thread and buttons. The store was dim and cool, and smelled like leather and tobacco and new cloth. Holtcombe stood behind the counter and nodded at them without judgment. "Morning, Miss Clara." "Wyatt." The door opened behind them. Mrs. Pettigrew came in with Sarah. Saw Clara, her mouth pinched. "Decent folk have standards, Mrs. Pettigrew said. Not to Clara, to the air, to anyone listening. But I suppose some people were not raised to know better." Clara's hand shook on the thread spool. She set it down carefully. And then something rose in her that was not anger exactly. It was the same thing that had made her hold Virgil Kane's eyes at the creek crossing. The refusal to be small. "Ma'am," Clara said. Her voice was steady. "I heard your husband left debts when he passed, and Mr. Cadell holds the paper on them. Maybe you should be careful about who you serve instead of who you judge." The Mercantile went silent. Mrs. Pettigrew's face went from red to white. Holcombe looked at his boots. Sarah Pettigrew, standing behind her mother, did something Clara did not expect. She smiled, just barely, just for a second. Then it was gone. Mrs. Pettigrew bought her calico and swept out without another word. Her daughter followed, but not before glancing back at Clara with something in her eyes that might have been respect. Clara paid for her thread with coins from her small purse. Her hands were still shaking. Outside, the sun was brutal. The walk home stretched ahead, 7 miles. Clara's feet were already blistering in her Sunday boots. They had gone maybe 2 miles when Wyatt stopped. He knelt in the grass beside the road. Clara came up beside him and saw it. One of his Herefords, a cow with a white face and gentle eyes lying on her side in the ditch. Her throat had been cut, not by coyotes. A clean blade, one stroke, and she had bled out into the grass. The blood was dark and thick, and the flies were already gathering. Around the cow's neck, tied with wire, was a scrap of paper, one word written on it in charcoal. Leave. Wyatt put his hand flat against the cow's white face, still warm. He did not speak for a long time. When he stood, Clara saw his eyes change. The quiet, careful man she had been living with disappeared for just a moment, replaced by something harder and older and much more dangerous. She saw the gunfighter surface, saw him look toward town with eyes that could calculate distance and angle, and the time it takes for a bullet to cross the space between two men. Then he pushed it down, locked it away, became Wyatt Sands again. He picked up the paper, read it, folded it, and put it in his pocket. They walked the rest of the way in silence. At the cabin, Clara found another piece of paper on the table, a folded note. She picked it up and read it. Town Council requests your presence. Tuesday evening. Matter of community standards. Someone had been inside the cabin while they were at church. Clara went cold. She moved to the shelf, picked up her sewing box and opened it, lifted the fabric lining. The map was still there, but it had been shifted. The fold was wrong, the crease angled differently than how she had left it. Someone had opened the box. Someone had seen the map. She looked at the note on the table. There was red clay mud on the paper. She knew that mud. It was the kind that only came from the road behind Cadell's store. She knew who had been in their cabin. She knew her secret was no longer a secret. And she said nothing. She tucked the map back into the sewing box, smoothed the lining, closed the lid, and said nothing. Because that was what Clara Brennan did. She hid things. It was the only way she knew to survive, and it had kept her alive this long, and she was not going to stop now just because a man with kind eyes and a hidden gun had given her a place to sleep. That night, Wyatt sat on the porch with the Winchester across his knees, and Clara sat inside with her sewing, and neither of them talked about the dead cow or the note or the council summons or the mud on the paper or the fact that someone had walked into their home and touched their things while they were praying to a God who was supposed to protect people like them. The silence between them was no longer comfortable. It was the silence of two people who both had secrets, and neither one knew that the other was carrying the same kind of weight. Storms in Wyoming do not arrive. They declare war. The sky had been building all afternoon. Clouds stacked up in the west like black mountains, and the air pressure dropped so fast Clara could feel it in her chest, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. The wind picked up hot and dry at first, smelling of dust and distant rain, then turning cold as the front pushed through. Wyatt secured the shutters, brought in extra wood, checked that the chickens were in the lean-to. Clara helped him carry water from the pump, filling every bucket and pot they had, because if the storm knocked over the pump handle, they would need reserves. She was running back from the lean-to when the first lightning cracked. The whole sky split white for a heartbeat, and in that flash, she saw something on the hilltop, a figure on horseback, sitting still as stone against the boiling clouds, looking down at the cabin. Then the darkness slammed back, and the thunder hit, and when the next flash came, the hilltop was empty. Clara ran inside. Wyatt was at the fireplace, building up the fire. He looked at her wet face, and did not ask what she had seen. She did not tell him. The rain came, not gentle, not gradual. It hit the tin roof like gravel, so loud they could not hear each other speak. Lightning turned the cabin white. Thunder shook the walls. Water began dripping from a crack in the roof into a bucket in the corner, a steady plinking rhythm under the roar. Clara lay on the bed in her dress and stared at the ceiling. The storm was enormous. It filled the world. She could not think over the noise of it, could not plan, could not catalog. She could only lie there and feel. She slept. She did not mean to, but the exhaustion of the past days dragged her under, and she dreamed. In the dream, her Uncle Silas stood in the cabin doorway. He was smiling the way he smiled when he was about to do something cruel. Behind him, 2 men waited with a wagon. Silas reached for Clara's arm and gripped it hard and started pulling her toward the door. She screamed for Wyatt. But Wyatt was standing by the fireplace, arms at his sides, watching her go. He did not move, did not speak, just watched with those quiet eyes as Silas dragged her across the floor and out into the dark. Clara woke gasping, soaked with sweat. The storm had not broken yet. The cabin was dark except for the embers in the fireplace, glowing orange against the stone. She sat up. The rope bed creaked. She looked at Wyatt sleeping on his bedroll by the fire. His face was turned away. His breathing was slow. She looked at her carpet bag, looked at the door. For the first time since she arrived, she wanted to run. Not because she feared Wyatt, because she feared that this cabin, this strange peace, this man who made rocking chairs and did not ask for anything, would be taken from her the way everything else had been taken. Her mother, her father, the farm, her dignity on the depot platform. Everything Clara had ever held close had been ripped away, and the pattern was so familiar it felt like prophecy. She was not allowed to keep things. That was the rule of her life. Better to run now while the leaving was her choice, than to wait for the moment when it would be forced on her. She stood up, took her carpet bag from the shelf, packed her mother's quilt, her sewing box, the tin type, moved to the door on silent feet. Her hand was on the latch when she heard it. Wyatt's voice. Not awake. Not speaking to her. Speaking from somewhere deep in sleep. The words barely formed, more breath than sound. Clara. Just her name. Said the way a man says a prayer he does not know he is praying. She stood at the door for a long time. The storm pressed against the cabin walls. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning flashed, and she saw her own hand on the latch, white-knuckled, trembling. She set the carpet bag down, went back to bed, did not unpack, just lay down with the bag beside her like a question she was not ready to answer. She did not sleep again. The storm broke in earnest around midnight. The lightning came so fast it was almost constant, and the thunder did not roll but cracked, sharp and close, shaking dust from the rafters. A tin plate fell off the shelf and clattered across the floor. Wyatt sat up, Clara sat up. They looked at each other across the dark room. "I cannot sleep," Clara said. "Me neither." She moved to the table, found a chair in the dark and sat down. Her hands were shaking and it was not from cold. Wyatt stood and lit the lamp, turned the flame low just enough to see by. He sat in the other chair. The rain hammered on. Water dripped into the bucket in the corner. The fire had burned to coals that pulsed orange, with each gust that found its way through the cracks. "I should tell you why I came west," Clara said. "You do not have to." "I want to." Lightning flashed. She saw his face for a moment, clear and still. Waiting. Papa lost the farm. Bank foreclosed. He had borrowed against it 3 years before when the crops failed. Could not make the payments. They gave him 30 days to clear out. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The wood was rough under her palms. He died 2 days after they came for the land. Doctor said his heart. But it was not his heart. It was shame. The kind that kills you from the inside. Thunder rumbled, longer this time. Moving east, Mama was already gone. Fever took her 3 years back. I had nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. And then my Uncle Silas came. She stopped, swallowed. Her mouth was dry. He tried to sell me to a house in St. Louis. Said it would settle the family debts. Said I should be grateful someone would take me. The rain eased slightly. She could hear her own breathing now, fast and shallow. I ran. Answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride. 3 men wrote back. I picked Hiram Cadell because his letter sounded kind. He said he wanted a partner. I told him I had $500. I lied. Told him my father had left me a sewing machine. Another lie. I thought if I could just get here, he would see I was willing to work, see I was worth keeping even without the money. She was crying now, not gentle tears, the hard kind that comes from a place below the stomach. But there is more, she said. And this is the part I should have told you days ago. She reached for her sewing box on the shelf, opened it, lifted the fabric lining, pulled out the folded map, and set it on the table between them. My father drew this. It is the location of a gold vein on our family's land. Small but real. The bank never knew about it. I hid it in my Bible when I left Missouri. It is the only valuable thing he left me. She looked at the map on the table. And someone has found it. When we were at church, someone came in here. They opened the sewing box. The map was moved. Wyatt's face went still. How long have you known? Clara swallowed. 2 days. The silence that followed was worse than shouting, worse than thunder. It was the silence of a man who has been lied to by someone he was beginning to trust. 2 days, Wyatt said. And you did not tell me. I was afraid. Clara's voice cracked. I was afraid that if you knew I had something worth taking, you would change. Everyone changes when they find out you have something they want. I do not change. But those 2 days could have gotten us both killed. The wound sat between them on the scarred pine table right next to the map. Then Wyatt put his hands flat on the wood, looked at them, at the scars and calluses and the history written in every line. My name is not Wyatt Sands, he said. Clara's head came up. It is Wyatt Cole. I killed 5 men in Abilene, Kansas. All legal, all fair fights, all self-defense. And the 5th was the son of the lieutenant governor. His hands tightened into fists. The family posted a bounty. $500, dead or alive. I ran, changed my name, came here. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of waking up every night wondering if tonight was the night someone would come. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet. If they find out who I am, they will come. They will. Not lawmen, bounty hunters. And that man who blocked the road, Virgil Kane, I think he already knows. The storm rolled overhead. Lightning flashed, and Clara saw his face clearly, and saw not the quiet rancher or the careful hermit, but the man underneath. A man carrying 5 deaths like stones in his pockets, drowning slowly in still water. You are not that man anymore, she said. How do you know? Because that man would not have helped me, would not have slept on the floor, would not have carved a spoon and built a rocking chair for a woman with nothing to give. He turned his hand over on the table, palm up. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, tight. Then we stay, he said. Both of them sitting at that table in the lamplight, the storm shaking the walls, understanding for the first time that they were both being hunted. Clara for the map's value, Wyatt for the price on his head. Both of them with every reason to run, neither one wanting to. The pounding on the door made them both jump. Wyatt was on his feet instantly. His hand went under the floorboard. Clara saw it clearly this time. Saw his fingers close on the Colt. Saw them grip it. Saw the struggle cross his face. Then he let go. Pulled his hand back empty. Clara stepped forward. No, we face it. The door opened to rain and torchlight. Sheriff Burl stood on the porch, water streaming off his hat. Behind him, 6 riders, horses stamping in the mud, torches hissing in the rain. Council meeting, Burl said. Tonight, you are expected at the schoolhouse. In the middle of a storm, Clara said. Council wants to be certain you come, Burl said. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. They pulled on coats. Clara wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. Wyatt reached under the floorboard one more time. Clara held her breath, but he did not take the gun. Just touched it, left it. They walked into the rain, 7 miles to town, mud sucking at their boots. The 6 riders flanking them on horseback, torches smoking in the wet air. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were hoofbeats squelching in mud and water dripping and the distant growl of thunder moving east. Clara walked beside Wyatt. Their shoulders touched. On the muddy road, Wyatt glanced back at the riders. His jaw tightened. At the rear of the escort, barely visible in the torchlight, rode Virgil Kane. And on Virgil's saddle, catching the torchlight with a dull gleam, was a Henry repeating rifle, a bounty hunter's weapon. The smallest schoolhouse in America can become the biggest courtroom. All it needs is enough people sitting in judgment. The building was packed. 60 people, maybe more, crammed into a space built for 30 children. Tobacco smoke hung thick as fog. Coal oil lamps burned on every surface, throwing shadows that jumped and wavered. The air was hot and close, and smelled like wet wool and sweat and righteousness. 5 men sat at a table in front. The town council. 3 Clara did not know. One was Hultcom from the Mercantile. The last was Hiram Cadell, sitting with his arms crossed and his face set like stone. Clara looked at the arrangement and understood instantly. Cadell was the one who had filed the complaint, and Cadell was sitting in judgment, plaintiff and judge in the same chair. The injustice of it was so plain that it would have been funny if it were not happening to her. 2 chairs faced the council table, empty, waiting. Clara and Wyatt walked to them through the crowd and sat down. Clara folded her hands in her lap to hide the trembling. The chairman, a man with gray mutton-chop whiskers and the self-important air of a small-town politician, stood. This hearing is called to address concerns raised by community members regarding improper cohabitation and moral conduct. This is not a trial, just a hearing, Sheriff Burrell confirmed from the back. He stood by the door with his arms crossed and his badge catching the lamplight. Mr. Cadell, the chairman said, you raised the initial complaint. You may speak. Cadell stood. He turned to face the crowd. Not Clara and Wyatt. The crowd. I think it is clear to everyone what is going on, he said. I brought a woman to this town in good faith. A woman who made promises she did not keep. She claimed a dowry of $500 and a sewing machine. She had neither. I had every right to refuse her. And what happens? This man takes her off the platform. Now they are living under the same roof. Unmarried. It is indecent. Murmurs of agreement from the crowd, heads nodding. But Cadell was not finished. And there is another matter, he said. His voice dropped, became something harder. I have reason to believe this woman carries stolen property. A map belonging to the bank that holds the deed on the Breaten land in Missouri. The schoolhouse went silent. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. This woman's father, Thomas Breaten, concealed assets from the bank before foreclosure, Cadell continued. That map shows the location of mineral deposits on that land, and I have purchased the bank's interest in the Breaten property. Whatever she carries belongs to me. Clara stared at Cadell, and in that moment the pieces fell together in her mind like tumblers in a lock. Cadell had not placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride because he was lonely. He had done it because he knew exactly who Clara Breaten was. Her uncle Silas had told him. Silas, who had tried to sell her to a brothel, had also sold her information to Cadell. Told him that Thomas Breaten had hidden something valuable on the land. Cadell had connected it to the gold rumors he had been chasing for years. The land-buying scheme around Millerton was preparation. The mail-order bride arrangement was a trap. Clara had walked into it willingly, carrying the very thing Cadell wanted, and the only reason she was not in his house right now, compliant and controlled in handing over the map, was because a stranger named Wyatt Sands had stepped between her and the wolf. The humiliation at the depot. The demand that she turn around. The cruelty. It was not rejection. It was strategy. break her spirit in front of witnesses so she would have nowhere to turn and no pride left. Then Cadell would have swooped in as the reluctant savior, taken her home, and extracted the map's location at his leisure. Wyatt stepping in was the variable Cadell had never planned for. Clara stood. Her legs shook but held. Her voice was quiet, but carried. "The map was drawn by my father," she said, "on our family's land, before the bank foreclosed, before any loans were taken. It does not belong to Mr. Cadell. It does not belong to the bank. And it certainly does not belong to anyone in this room." She looked at the crowd. 60 faces, some sympathetic, most not. My father was a good man who made bad luck and died of shame. I lied about the dowry because I was desperate. I am not ashamed of surviving. But I am standing here now telling the truth, and that should count for something. Silence. Then Cadell spoke again. His voice was different now, quieter, something cracked in it. "I trusted a woman once. She took everything and vanished. I do not make that mistake twice." One sentence. It did not excuse anything he had done. But it opened a window into the man, just for a second, and the crowd shifted uncomfortably because some of them had known his first wife and known what she had done. Then Wyatt stood. He did not look at the council. He turned to Clara, looked at her with those quiet eyes that had seen too much and hidden it for too long. "She will be my wife," he said. His voice was clear and steady. "What is hers is mine, and I protect what is mine." The schoolhouse erupted. Gasps, whispers. Mrs. Pettigrew's fan snapped shut. The back door opened. Reverend Michaels came in, shaking rain from his coat. His white hair was plastered to his head, and his old boots were caked with mud. But his eyes were sharp. "Heard there was a meeting," he said. "Thought I should attend." He walked to the front, looked at the council, looked at Clara and Wyatt. "If there is no legal objection to two grown people marrying, then I will perform the ceremony Sunday at 2. Anyone who wants to witness is welcome." The chairman cleared his throat. "Council needs to vote." "Vote on what?" Reverend Michaels asked. "On whether two people can marry. That is between them and their conscience." Hulkcom stood. "I vote we adjourn." One by one, the other council members nodded, even Cadell, though his face was dark as a thundercloud. Meeting adjourned. The crowd filed out. Some looked disappointed. Some looked relieved. Mrs. Pettigrew left without looking at anyone. But Sarah stopped by Clara's chair and leaned down and whispered, "That took courage. What you said." Then she was gone. Clara and Wyatt stood. They walked to the door where Reverend Michaels waited. "Sunday," he said, 2:00. Outside, the rain had stopped. Stars showed through breaks in the clouds. In the shadows beside the schoolhouse, Cadell stood with Virgil Kane. Their voices were low, but Clara caught the words as she and Wyatt passed. "Find out who Sands really is. I will pay double." Virgil nodded. His eyes caught the lamplight from the schoolhouse window, and they were bright with the kind of knowing that a man hides when the price is not right yet. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothed it against his leg. Clara could not see what was on it, but Wyatt, walking beside her, glanced back once, and his face went white. He had seen the paper. He knew what it was, a wanted poster, his face on it, his real name under it. $500. Virgil had been carrying it for weeks. Wyatt Sands knew how to kill a man in half a second. But he did not know how to tell a woman he loved her without hearing his own voice shake. They walked through the muddy dark away from the schoolhouse. Clara was beside him, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, her boots squelching in the mud. She had not spoken since they left. The silence between them was thick with things unsaid. They had reached the edge of town when she stopped walking. "Did you propose to me?" she said. "Or did you declare war on Cadell?" Wyatt turned. "What? What is hers is mine. I protect what is mine." Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes were hard. I did not hear love in that, Wyatt. I heard a man staking territory. The words hit him like a slap. He opened his mouth to argue and closed it again because she was right. I was already treated as inventory by one man, Clara said. I do not need another one treating me as territory to defend. I need someone who asks me what I want, not someone who announces what he's going to do with me in front of 60 people. Wyatt's hands tightened on his belt. The moonlight was coming through the broken clouds now, and it turned the muddy road silver and Clara's face pale and sharp. He thought about what she said. Thought about the way he had stood in that schoolhouse and spoken about her like she was property to be claimed. He had meant it as protection. But protection was the only language he knew, and the only way he had ever protected anything was with violence, or the threat of it. His whole life, keeping something safe had meant being willing to kill for it. He did not know how to love without turning love into a fight. He stopped the buckboard they had borrowed from Hulkcom, climbed down, stood in front of Clara in the muddy road. No crowd, no council, no torches, no witnesses. Just two people in the wet grass and the stars coming out. Clara Breaten, he said. His voice shook and he let it. I am no good with words. I am good at shooting and whittling, but I am asking you, just you, will you stay with me? Not because you need a roof, because I need you. Clara looked at him. Looked at this man standing in the mud with his hands at his sides and his voice breaking, and his eyes asking a question that terrified him more than any gunfight ever had. Yes, she said. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different silence now. The kind that sits between people who have said the hard thing and survived it. At the cabin, Wyatt carried something from the barn. He had been working on it every night after Clara fell asleep, and it was finished now. A rocking chair, pine, hand-joined, smooth as water. He set it on the porch beside the one that was already there. Clara ran her hand over the arm. The wood was warm under her fingers, every joint tight, every surface sanded until it was soft as cloth. It is beautiful, she said. I made it so you would have a place to sit beside me, Wyatt said. The simplest sentence he had ever spoken. And the deepest. They sat on the porch in the two chairs and rocked in the darkness, and talked about the future for the first time. Clara mentioned the map. Maybe they could use it to buy more land, build the herd, make something real. Wyatt shook his head. I do not want to build a future on gold. I want to build on ground I work myself. Gold brings trouble. Always has. Always will. Clara understood. Gold was not just metal. It was a magnet for the kind of men who had been circling them since she arrived. The next morning, Reverend Michaels rode out to the cabin. He brought a wedding ring in a small cloth pouch. It was a gold band, plain and simple. His wife's ring. She passed 8 years back, he said. She would have wanted someone to use it. Clara held the ring in her palm. It was warm from the Reverend's pocket. Light, but it felt like the heaviest thing she had ever held. Michaels also brought a warning. Cadell sent a telegram to Dodge City yesterday, he said. I do not know the contents, but he's looking for something. Or someone. Wyatt's face did not change, but Clara saw his hand go still on the porch rail. Michaels paused at the door, looked at Clara with those sharp old eyes. Brennan, he said. Are you kin to Thomas Brennan, out of Boone County, Missouri? Clara's breath caught. He was my father. The Reverend's face changed. Something moved across it, deep and private. He nodded slowly. I owe your father a debt, he said quietly. On your wedding day, I will repay it. Then he rode away without explaining. Clara stood on the porch and watched him go and felt the shape of something she could not see yet, a pattern forming in the dark, like the smoke stains on the cabin ceiling that looked like nothing until you lay still long enough to find the continents. That night, after Clara fell asleep, Wyatt knelt beside the floorboard. He lifted it, took out the oilcloth bundle, unwrapped the Colt .45. The gun was cold and familiar. The weight of it settled into his hand like a handshake from an old friend he had been trying to forget. He opened the cylinder, cleaned it, oiled it, loaded 6 rounds. Each brass cartridge slid into place with a soft click that echoed in the quiet cabin. His right hand remembered, not just the weight of the gun, the feeling of the trigger under his finger, the sound, the recoil, and the faces. The first man he ever killed was a 19-year-old kid, drunk, stupid, pulling a pistol because he had lost at cards and thought the world owed him a win. The kid's hand was shaking so bad the shot went wide by 3 feet. Wyatt's did not. The kid fell backward and his eyes stayed open. Blue eyes, open and empty and staring at the saloon ceiling. Wyatt had seen those eyes every night for 5 years. The cylinder clicked shut. Wyatt looked at the gun in his hand, looked at the rafter beam above the fireplace where 5 tally marks were carved into the wood, one for each man who had died because Wyatt Cole was faster than they were. He heard a sound behind him, turned. Clara stood in the doorway in her nightdress. The lamplight was behind her. Her face was in shadow, but he could see her eyes. "You swore you would never draw again," she said. "I swore I would never draw for myself again," Wyatt said. "Now I have a different reason." Clara looked at the gun, looked at him, crossed the room and put her hand on his wrist, not pulling the gun away, not taking it from him, just touching his skin above the cold metal. "Then come back to me when you're done," she said. "Whatever happens out there, come back." She went back to bed. Wyatt sat with the loaded Colt in his hands and listened to the night, listened to the wind, listened to his own heart beating. Then he heard hoofbeats, not one horse, 3, coming from the direction of town, coming fast, and they were not stopping. The hen house burned first, then the barn. And when Wyatt looked out through the shutter gap, he knew that 3 years of running had just ended on the ground he had dared to call home. It was the night before the wedding. Clara had been asleep for maybe an hour when the first smell of smoke reached the cabin. Wyatt was sitting at the table with the Colt in front of him, not sleeping, not trying to. He was waiting. The hoofbeats he had heard were out there somewhere in the dark, circling. The orange glow appeared first in the east window, then the sound, the dry crack of wood catching, the whoosh of flame running through straw and old timber. Wyatt went to the window and pushed open the shutter. The hen house was fully engulfed. Flames climbed 10 feet, orange and yellow against the black sky, sparks spiraling upward like hellish fireflies. Even as he watched, the barn caught. The lean-to wall that faced the hen house went up like paper, and the fire ran across the roof and down the other side. Buck screamed. The sound of a horse in terror is a thing that goes through you like a blade. Wyatt grabbed the Colt, yanked on his boots, crossed the cabin in 3 strides. Clara was sitting up in bed, her eyes wide. "What is happening?" "Stay behind the fireplace," Wyatt said. "Stone wall. Safest place in the cabin. Do not come out until I say." He kicked open the barn door. The smoke hit him like a fist. He could hear Buck thrashing in his stall, hear the Herefords bellowing. He got Buck's halter, hauled the horse out through the smoke, the gelding's eyes rolling white. The Herefords followed, stumbling, coughing, their white faces ghostly in the firelight. The animals scattered into the dark prairie. From the yard, a voice called out, clear and mocking over the roar of flame. "Wyatt Cole, $500 on your head. Come out or I burn the cabin with your woman inside." Virgil Kane stood in the yard with a torch in one hand and his pistol in the other. Behind him, 2 men on horseback, one left, one right. The firelight threw their shadows long across the mud. Wyatt stepped onto the porch. The Colt hung at his side. His hand was shaking. His heart was hammering. His boots were steady on the boards. He looked at Virgil, looked at the 2 gunmen, calculated angles and distances the way a man does when his body remembers things his mind has tried to forget. Virgil was smiling, the same smile from the depot, the same smile from the creek crossing. But there was something nervous in it now because Virgil knew who he was dealing with. Wyatt Cole. 5 men dead in Abilene, fastest gun in Kansas. Virgil was fast, but Virgil was not stupid. He did not want to draw against the man who had never missed. "You can walk away," Virgil said. "Come peaceful to Dodge City. Collect the bounty. Clear your name. Leave the girl. Nobody has to die tonight." Wyatt looked at the burning barn. at the hen house reduced to coals, at the scattered cattle disappearing into the darkness. "The bounty is not yours to collect," Wyatt said, "and she is not mine to leave." Inside the cabin, Clara moved. She was supposed to be behind the fireplace. Instead, she was standing at the mantel, reaching up. Her hand closed on the Winchester. The dusty rifle nobody had touched in years. She pulled it down, checked the lever. There was a round in the chamber. She did not know how she knew that, but she did. She went to the window, looked out through the gap in the shutter. She could see Wyatt on the porch, see Virgil in the yard, see the two gunmen on his flanks. Clara racked the lever. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin, metal on metal. She shouldered the rifle and pointed it through the window gap. Aimed at the sky, she fired. The shot cracked through the night, louder than the fire, louder than the thunder that still rumbled in the distance. The gunman on the left flinched hard. His horse shied. He swung his pistol toward the cabin window, toward the flash. Wyatt drew. One shot. It hit the left gunman's hand. The pistol spun away into the mud. The man screamed and grabbed his wrist, and his horse bolted, and he went with it, clinging to the saddle horn with his good hand. Virgil drew. Fast. Very fast. Wyatt was faster. The colt barked once. The bullet took Virgil in the shoulder, spun him halfway around. He dropped to one knee, his gun hand going slack. His pistol fell into the mud beside him. "I could have killed you," Wyatt said. His voice was steady now. The shaking was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was something older and harder and more controlled than fear. "I chose not to. That is the difference between who I was and who I am." The third gunman did not wait. He turned his horse and kicked it hard and rode into the darkness without looking back. Virgil knelt in the mud, blood running from his shoulder, his face twisted with pain and rage. Then he shouted it, the words that would change everything. "Cadell paid me. Cadell ordered this. Every bit of it. The fire, the threats, all of it. Cadell. Hoofbeats from the road, not fleeing, arriving." Sheriff Burrell rode into the firelight on a lathered horse, his badge catching the orange glow. Behind him, Sarah Pettigrew's voice carried from the road. She had seen the fire from town, had pounded on Burrell's door, had said the words that hit the exact wound he had been carrying since his daughter died. "You are the sheriff. If you do not go, no one will." "Oh, no." Burrell looked at the burning barn, at Virgil Kane bleeding in the mud, at Wyatt standing on the porch with the Colt in his hand and firelight in his eyes. For 3 years, Sheriff Tom Burrell had looked the other way, had let Cadell own his badge, had stood at his daughter's grave every Sunday and hated the man he had become. Not tonight. "Virgil Kane," Burrell said. His voice did not shake. "You are under arrest for arson and attempted murder." The badge on his chest caught the firelight. It looked different now, heavier, like it meant something again. Burrell dismounted, tied Virgil's hands with rope, looked at the blood and the fire and the guns, and then turned to Wyatt. "I need you to testify, and I need to know who you really are, before the whole territory finds out from someone who does not have your best interests at heart." Wyatt looked at Clara, who had come out of the cabin with the Winchester still in her hands. Her face was streaked with smoke and her eyes were bright, and she nodded. "My name is Wyatt Cole," he said. "I killed 5 men in Abilene, Kansas. Every one was self-defense, and I would like to stop running now." Clara stepped forward. "I knew who you were from the first day. The callus on your trigger finger does not come from ranch work." Wyatt looked at her. "You knew. I know a lot of things. I am learning to stop hiding them." Burrell sent a telegram to Dodge City from the depot. They stood in the road beside the burned barn and waited for dawn. The fire died down to embers and ash and the smell of charred wood. The cabin stood, untouched. The stone fireplace had held. Inside, above the mantel, 5 tally marks waited in the shadow of the rafter beam. Sunday morning. her wedding day, and the whole town was already inside the church, not for the ceremony but for the reckoning. The telegram reply arrived from Dodge City at dawn. It came clicking through the wire, and the station master wrote it out and brought it to Sheriff Burrell personally, still in his nightshirt, because even the station master knew this one mattered. The bounty on Wyatt Cole had been withdrawn 6 months ago. The lieutenant governor's family had dropped the claim after a new witness came forward and confirmed that the dead man drew first. Wyatt Cole was a free man. Burrell brought the telegram to the cabin where Wyatt and Clara were sitting on the porch in their 2 rocking chairs, watching the sun come up over the ashes of their barn. Wyatt read the telegram twice. His hands did not shake. His face did not change. But Clara, sitting beside him, saw something shift behind his eyes, something loosen, like a rope that had been pulled tight for years, finally letting go. "You are free," she said. "Reckon I am." Word had spread overnight, the fire, Virgil's arrest, Virgil's accusation against Cadell. By morning, every soul in Millerton knew the story, and by the time the church bell rang at 2 o'clock, the pews were packed. Not for worship, for truth. Clara walked in wearing the blue calico she had arrived in. She had washed it twice, mended the tear in the sleeve, sewn on new buttons from Hulkcoms. It was faded, but it was clean. It was hers. Wyatt wore his cleanest shirt, brown cotton worn soft with washing. No jacket. He had a small nick on his jaw where the razor had slipped. His boots were cleaned of mud, but still showed the scorch marks from the fire. They walked down the aisle, every head turned. But the eyes on them were different today. Not all of them kind, but many of them curious. And some of them, Clara thought, almost respectful. They had reached the front of the church when the door opened behind them. Hiram Cadell walked in. He was dressed in his best suit. His boots were polished, and he carried a sheaf of documents in his hand. He walked down the aisle and stopped, looked at the congregation, looked at Clara. "Whatever this girl carries," he said, "it belongs to me. The land, the minerals, the map. I hold the paper from the bank. I purchased the rights to the Breaten property and everything on it and under it. She has nothing that is not mine." The church went silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. She had known Cadell would not give up easily, but she had not expected this. Legal documents, bank paper, the weight of money and law, and the kind of power that did not need guns because it had something worse. Legitimacy. Then Reverend Michael stood. He rose from his chair like it hurt him, his old bones creaking, his hands trembling. But his eyes were the sharpest things in the room. He reached into his coat and brought out an envelope. Old, yellowed, the seal unbroken. "Hiram," he said, "I have carried this for 15 years. The church held its breath, held its... Thomas Brennan gave this to me the year he knew the bank was coming," Michael said. His voice was steady despite his shaking hands. "He said to me, 'If my daughter ever needs this before the law, give it to her.' I honored that promise. I never opened it. I did not know what was inside." He looked at Clara. His eyes were wet. "I believe this is that moment." He broke the seal. His own hands shook as he unfolded the paper inside, because he was reading it for the first time, too. His eyes moved across the words, and then went wide, and his voice cracked. It was a certified copy of Thomas Brennan's original will, signed and witnessed before any loans were taken out, before the bank, before the foreclosure, before everything. The will specified that mineral rights on the Brennan land were legally separated from the surface deed and bequeathed solely and irrevocably to his daughter, Clara Brennan. The bank had foreclosed on the land. They had never foreclosed on what was underneath it. The map was Clara's. The gold was Clara's. And Cadell's bank documents were worth nothing. Reverend Michaels looked up from the paper. His old voice filled the church. Thomas Brennan protected his daughter from 15 years away. And I did not even know I was helping him do it. Clara's hand went to her mouth. Her father, her quiet, broken father who had died of shame on the floor of a farmhouse that was no longer his. He had planned this, had seen the bank coming, and had found a way, one small legal way, to save the only thing that mattered to him. He had reached across 15 years and death itself and put a shield around his daughter. The church erupted, everyone talking at once. Cadell standing in the aisle with his worthless documents and his face going from red to white. Sheriff Burrell stepped forward. He looked different than he had a week ago. Taller, straighter. The badge sat true on his chest. Hiram Cadell, you are under arrest. Illegal lending, fraud. Conspiracy to commit arson. You will be held in the county jail until transfer to the territorial prison in Laramie to await trial. Cadell opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But there were no words left. Burrell took his arm and led him out. In the silence that followed, Mrs. Agnes Pettigrew stood up. The whole church went still. Clara braced herself. Mrs. Pettigrew walked down the aisle, slowly. Her face was working, her mouth tight, her eyes bright with something Clara did not expect. She stopped in front of Clara, looked at her for a long moment. I was wrong, she said. Her voice was small, but it carried. Forgive me. Clara looked at this woman who had made her life miserable since the moment she stepped off the train. Looked at the proud face crumbling. Looked at the fear underneath the cruelty, the debt that had made Mrs. Pettigrew a puppet for a man she despised. Clara nodded. Her eyes were red but dry. In the back row, Sarah Pettigrew smiled. She had secrets of her own. The letters to the territorial judge that had helped set this wheel turning. But that was a story she would keep. Reverend Michael straightened his coat, wiped his eyes, looked at the congregation. Now then, he said, if no one else has any objections, I have a wedding to perform. Wyatt Cole. Sands Cole. Whatever name he carried, he had killed 5 men, run for 3 years, slept on his own floor for 3 weeks. But today he was getting married. The church was full. Not packed like it had been an hour ago for the reckoning, but full. People in the pews who chose to stay. People who wanted to witness something good after witnessing something hard. Reverend Michael stood at the front with his Bible open and his old voice steady. He read the vows the way he had read them hundreds of times before. But today there was something different in the words. Today they sounded like they meant what they said. Do you, Wyatt, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Wyatt's voice was clear and strong and did not shake. I do. Do you, Clara, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Clara's throat was tight. The words came out rough and real. I do. Wyatt took the gold band from his pocket. The Reverend's wife's ring, worn smooth with years of love. He slid it onto Clara's finger. It was warm from his pocket, a little loose, but it stayed. Clara took something from the pocket of her blue calico dress, a ring she had made herself, bent and shaped from a piece of copper wire she had found in the ashes of the burned barn. She slid it onto Wyatt's finger. It is not gold, she said, but it came from the fire. Same as us. I pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Michael said. You may kiss the bride. Wyatt looked at Clara. She looked at him. Neither moved for a moment that stretched long enough to hold everything they had been through. Then he leaned forward. His lips touched hers, brief, dry, gentle. He pulled back. His ears were red. Clara reached up, took his face in both hands, and kissed him again, properly, the way a woman kisses a man she chose for herself. The church erupted in applause. Not everyone, but enough. They walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, married. Clara could feel the weight of the copper ring on her finger and the weight of Wyatt's hand in hers, and both felt right. Outside, someone had set up a table. Food appeared from nowhere, the way food does in small towns when people decide to be generous. Potato salad in a crock, biscuits wrapped in cloth, lemonade with a dipper. Women brought plates. Men shook Wyatt's hand, brief and stiff and uncomfortable, but they did it. Holcomb brought a sack. Wedding gift, sugar, coffee, flour. Much obliged, Wyatt said, and he meant it. Sarah Pettigrew brought a pie. Apple from the smell. She held it out to Clara with both hands. I made this, she said quietly, for you. Thank you, Clara said. Sarah smiled. Behind her, Mrs. Pettigrew stood by the church wall with her arms crossed. She was not smiling, but she was not leaving either. And when Clara looked at her, Mrs. Pettigrew gave the smallest nod, just barely. But it was there. A light rain began to fall. Not a storm, not even close. Just a soft misting. The kind of rain that ranchers called blessing rain because it soaked the ground slow and deep and made things grow. It pattered on the scorched earth where the barn had stood. It beaded on the rose cutting that the Reverend's wife had sent, wrapped in wet burlap with a note that said every home ought to have a rose bush. Nobody moved inside. The rain felt right. Sheriff Burl offered to drive them home in his wagon, climbing into the back, surrounded by gifts and food and the goodwill of people who had once shunned them. Clara felt something she had not felt since she was a child in her mother's kitchen. She felt like she belonged somewhere. The wagon rolled out of town. The church grew smaller behind them. The prairie opened up, gold and green under the rain, and the sky was enormous, and the air smelled like wet sage and new beginnings. Clara looked at Wyatt. He looked at her. Mrs. Sands, he said. Mr. Sands, she said. His hand found hers, squeezed. The cabin appeared ahead. The barn was ashes. The henhouse was gone. But the cabin stood. Smoke rose from the chimney where they had banked the fire that morning. The two rocking chairs waited on the porch. Sheriff Burl stopped the wagon, helped unload the gifts. Congratulations, he said, tipped his hat, drove away. Clara stepped down from the wagon. Her old carpet bag slipped from the pile of gifts and fell to the ground. Same bag, same worn leather, same broken clasp. Wyatt bent and picked it up, handed it to her. Last time you picked that up for a stranger, Clara said. This time, I am picking it up for my wife. They planted the rose cutting by the front wall, sheltered from the wind. Wyatt dug the hole with his hands deep enough for the roots to take. Clara unwrapped the cutting and placed it in the earth. They filled in the dirt together, patted it down, watered it with rainwater from the barrel. Think it will grow, Clara asked. It will grow. Inside, the cabin was warm. The fire had kept while they were gone. Clara lit the lamp. The clean chimney made the light bright and steady. She looked around at the quilt on the bed, the organized shelves, the wooden spoon on the shelf, the two tin cups side by side. They ate supper from the food people had brought, potato salad and biscuits and a slice of Sarah Pettigrew's apple pie. They sat at the pine table across from each other and ate quietly, and the lamplight was warm, and the rain tapped gently on the roof, and everything was real. When the dishes were washed, Clara dried her hands and turned to find Wyatt standing in the middle of the cabin. He was looking at the floor, then at the bed, then at the floor again. For 3 weeks he had slept on those boards by the fireplace. Saddle for a pillow, wool blanket for a bed. It was what he knew. It was what he believed he deserved. The floor was penance. The floor was where killers slept. Clara crossed the room, took his hand, led him to the bed, placed his hand on the pillow. No more floor, she said. Wyatt sat on the edge of the bed. The ropes creaked under him. He bowed his head. His shoulders shook. Not loud crying, not weeping, just a trembling that started in his chest and moved outward until his whole body was vibrating with it. His jaw was clenched tight. His hands gripped the edge of the mattress until his knuckles went white. 3 years. 3 years of silence and solitude and sleeping on hard floors because he did not believe he was worth a mattress. 3 years of looking at 5 tally marks every morning and carrying 5 dead men with him every night. 3 years of not being touched and not being spoken to, and not hearing his own name said with anything other than suspicion or fear. Clara sat beside him, did not speak, did not try to fix it, just put her hand on his back, on the old scars she had glimpsed through the window that first morning when she watched him wash at the pump. Long white marks across his shoulder blades. Old wounds. Stories she would hear someday, but not tonight. Tonight she just touched them, let him know that she had seen them and was still here. Wyatt exhaled. A long, slow breath, the kind of breath that carries everything with it. 3 years of loneliness leaving his body all at once. "You are home, Wyatt," Clara said. He turned and looked at her, nodded, could not speak, did not need to. Later, Wyatt went inside alone. Clara sat on the porch in her rocking chair and watched the stars come out through breaks in the rain clouds. Through the window, she saw him stand on the hearth, reach up to the rafter beam above the fireplace. His hand found the 5 tally marks he had carved there, one for each man who had died, because Wyatt Cole was faster than they were. He stood there for a moment with his fingers on the marks. Then he took his pocket knife from his pocket, opened it. Slowly and deliberately, he scored a single line through all 5 marks, not erasing them, not pretending they were not there, acknowledging them, then putting them down. He closed the knife, went to the table, picked up the Colt .45, opened the cylinder, removed all 6 rounds, one by one, setting them on the table like small brass prayers, wrapped the gun in the oilcloth, carried it outside. Clara watched him walk to the rose bush they had planted. He knelt in the damp earth, dug a hole beside the roots with his bare hands, set the wrapped gun in the hole, filled it in, patted the dirt flat. He stood up, looked at the mound of fresh earth where the colt lay sleeping under the roots of something alive. Violence buried, new life planted on top. He came to the porch, sat down in his rocking chair beside Clara. The runners creaked. She reached over and found his hand. He took it. Their fingers intertwined. "You happy?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. The chairs rocked, the stars brightened. The rain had stopped, and the night air was clean and cool and smelled like wet grass and roses that had not bloomed yet but would. "I do not know what happy feels like," he said. "But I know that for the first time in my life, I do not want to be anywhere else." Clara closed her eyes, felt the night air on her face, felt his hand in hers, felt the weight of the copper ring on her finger and the solid wood of the chair beneath her, made by his hands for her to sit in. Weeks later, a reporter from the Cheyenne Leader rode out to Millerton. He had heard the story. The Abilene gunfighter, who took in a mail-order bride the whole town rejected, who faced down bounty hunters and a corrupt land grabber, who chose mercy over killing, who buried his gun under a rose bush and married the woman everyone said was worth nothing. He found Wyatt mending the fence where the new barn was going up. Volunteers from town were helping. Holcomb had donated lumber. Even Sheriff Burl had swung a hammer. The reporter wanted an interview. Wyatt shook his head. "I am not a story. I am just a man who got lucky." The reporter wrote it anyway. Talked to people in town. To Reverend Michaels, to Sarah Pettigrew, who said more than her mother would have liked, to Holcomb, who said Wyatt Sands was the most decent man in the territory, and anyone who said different could take it up with him personally. The story ran under a headline that would be read aloud in saloons and trading posts and depot waiting rooms along the Union Pacific line from Cheyenne to Omaha. The cowboy who silenced the West. Not with bullets, with a choice. And in those saloons, Men read it and went quiet for a while. Not because the story told them something new, because it reminded them of something old. That kindness is not weakness. That mercy is not cowardice. That the strongest thing a man can do is not pull a trigger but open his hand. Some stories do not need a response. They just need to sit there, the way true things do. Back in Millerton, on a small ranch outside of town, the rosebush grew. It put out new leaves, pale green against the dark earth. The roots spread down and found the oilcloth bundle buried beneath them, and grew around it, the way living things grow around the hard things they cannot move. In time, the bush would bloom, red roses against a weathered cabin wall, and on the porch, 2 rocking chairs creaked in the same slow rhythm, evening after evening, season after season, as though the house itself had learned to breathe again. Wind moved through the prairie grass. The sun set gold and purple over the endless land. And the chairs rocked on and on and on,